Hello everyone, I'm Peize. Today, I want to introduce Chinese poetry culture. The process I introduced is historical background, the generation of the oldest Chinese poetry, the formation and characteristics of Tang poetry, the influence of ancient poetry on modern times, the comparison with other countries' poetry. First, I will introduce the origin of Chinese poetry. It is widely believed that the oldest Chinese poetry originated when the farming civilization was just formed. At that time, people released the pressure of labor by singing. It is based on the fact that the oldest poem that can be verified is related to agriculture, which describes farming life and expresses farmers' mood. The origin of this poem is said to be more than 3,000 years ago during the Shang dynasty. The first 4 sentences of this poem mainly describe the working life and introduce the ways for farmers to seek food. The last sentence expresses farmers' feeling of pursuing freedom without caring about kingship. Next, let's enjoy its music version.
日出而作，日入而息，早起而饮，耕田而食。地利与我何有哉？地利与我何有哉？
We can see its 3 characteristics from this poem. First, music in song form. Second, the content is related to daily life. Third, the number of words in each sentence may not be the same. The reason of the first characteristic is that singing has become a good way to relieve stress in the period when there are not enough entertainment activities. The second characteristic can be reflected in the first 4 sentences to describe farmers' lives. When it comes to the third feature, the first 4 sentences are all of 4 words, while the last sentence is 7 words, which shows that the number of words in each sentence may not be equal. Now I will introduce Tang poetry. Since China was divided in the southern and northern dynasties, when the words of standard language were pronounced in 4 tones in southern China, Chinese ancient poems began to pay attention to the flat tones. After that, it was popular in Tang poetry of Tang dynasty. There are mainly 5 words and 7 words in Tang poetry. That is, each sentence is fixed with 5 or 7 words. The flat tone or words in each poem has a certain regularity, and the rhythm can be changed. It also requires the middle 4 sentences to become antitheses. In this literary system, there are Li Bai, Du Fu, Han Yu, and others. The most famous one is Li Bai. Li Bai is a famous Chinese poet, a great romantic poet. His poems have individual characteristics and reached the peak of poetic art. He wrote more than 30,000 poems in his life, and there are more than 1,000 poems in existence. It has the reputation of poet fairy. Next, I will introduce this representative poem about Li Bai's poem when he watched the waterfall on Lushan mountain. He painted the waterfall vividly with highly exaggerated artistic technique, and then described the concrete scene of the waterfall in detail, describing the waterfall as magnificent and magnificent when measured weather, just like a vivid landscape painting. This 7-character quatrain has always been widely taught. The first 2 sentences describe the magnificent scene of Lushan Waterfall, which is both hazy and magnificent. The last 2 sentences further depict the image and the momentum of the waterfall with exaggerated metaphor and romantic imagination. Last few is rhythm.
日照香炉生紫烟，遥看瀑布挂前川。飞流直下3000尺，疑是银河落9天。
From this poem, I summarize 3 characteristics. First, there is a certain regularity in the flat tone sound of words in each poem. Second, the rhythm cannot be converted, and the middle 4 sentences are required to be antithetical. Third, the content began to pay attention to the literary effect. The first characteristic is that its rhythms from the last word of each sentence in the poem. For example, in this poem is Yan, Chun, Shi, Tian. The second characteristic is obvious. It can be seen that the 4 sentences have the same number of words and are neat and antithetical. The third characteristic can be seen in the last 2 sentences. That is, the height of the waterfall is written by exaggeration, and the waterfall is compared to the Milky Way by metaphor. After that, I want to talk about the influence of ancient poetry on modern times. Nowadays, many people will quote ancient poetry sentences with high literariness when writing articles, including writing blessing or expressing emotions in life, but also has a profound influence on modern music. Let's take a look at the quote ancient poem as an example. Let's talk about the background of the quoted poem first. The author of this poem is Levi. The first 2 sentences describe the scenery to set up the author's loneliness about his friend's long trip, and the last 2 sentences express the author's sad mood of seeing off his friends. Let's enjoy this music together.
杨花落尽子规啼，闻道路飘过无锡。我寄愁心与明月，随风直到夜郎西。
Next, compare the similarities and difference between Chinese tongue poetry and Japanese waka. Waka is a literary system produced by the combination of Japanese native culture and ancient Chinese 乐府 poems. Among them, tanka are the most famous, with 5 sentences and 31 syllables. I think this tanka is better.
日昔の野に限ろ日の辰見えて帰りにすれば月傾きぬ
This tanka is a famous Japanese poet, Kakimoto no Kitamaro, wrote at the imperial ancient throne. Metaphor is quoted this poem. The reasons and inflammation indicated the new imperial, and the titled moon indicated the former imperial. I think that compared with tongue poetry, Japanese tanka are similar in that they use metaphor to express feelings and describe scenery. The differences lies in rhythm and format. No and nu are nearly for Japanese, but they are different ancient for Chinese. I think the difference in rhythm lies in the linguistic difference between them. The pronunciation of Chinese is more than completed than that of Japanese, the vocabulary is richer. There are many different words with the same meaning, so it is easier to master the rhythm. Based on the above representative points of different ages, I think the evolution of poem is determined by the social atmosphere of the times. In the period of low productivity, people paid more attention to life, so the poems at that time were mainly about life. When the material life reaches the ideal state, in order to make up for the spiritual needs, the original unprecious songs will also evolve into literary works, thus forming the classical culture that modern people love. These are the references. Thank you for listening.